All right, Leah.
Record too.
Yeah, let me know when you're set. Awesome. I'm so excited for our conversation today. Before we kind of dive into a lot of these topics, I just want to start off with the basics. Can you tell me and introduce to people listening a little bit about yourself and kind of what you're up to now?
Yeah, I'm really excited to have this conversation with you, Kiersten. I think what you're doing is amazing, and it just really aligns with what I do for my profession. So I'm a life coach, and I specifically coach people around like relationship transitions. So anything along the lines of breakups, divorce, or even, people who have lost connection with their partner and they want to sort of transition back into that deeper connective place with them. So anything along the lines of relationships and the way those kind of fluidly transform, I sort of coach people through those sometimes like super confusing times.
Right. So what kind of inspired you to start this path of being a life coach? That's actually something that I didn't even know existed. So I think coming into my 20s and now with social media, I've learned a lot about the definition of what a life coach is. But when did you decide, or what experiences helped shape that this was going to be your career path?
Yeah, it's funny because I had really not heard a lot about life coaching either until I had heard a little bit about it, but to me it always had seemed like this sort of profession that was mysterious to me and maybe not taken so seriously. But when I've always sort of seen myself as someone who's very easy to talk to and someone who listens a lot to my friends and always offers advice, although I never used to take my own advice because that's a lot harder to do. But I'd always been the person that people turned to. So what actually created this, career was when I was transitioning myself out of a relationship, out of my marriage, actually. I was going through a divorce, and I was also working with my ex-husband, and we owned like a real estate business together. It was successful and took up a lot of my time, but I had done that for like 6 years. And so when I decided to leave that relationship, I also had to leave the career. And I had to really assess like, okay, what are the natural gifts that I already have going forward? What are the tools that I've gained, like, with my degree in communications? And also like what really excites me. I had never like actually asked myself like what I wanted and what excited me. It was always just sort of doing things to please other people and to make life easier for others, or to make people, happy with me or proud of me. So taking all those things into account and really like being faced with nothing but possibilities and a blank slate, I discovered that life coaching was the path that I wanted to explore. And, 2.5 years later, here we are. So it's been a journey for sure.
Definitely. I think many times it's easy to forget that life coaching is essentially entrepreneurship. There is no blueprint to
Right.
this path. So tell us a little bit about that. How did you navigate that? You knew you wanted to do this, you knew this was a passion of yours, but how did you decide maybe not to go get a master's or work for a firm, or just to start this up from the ground up? Like, what was that entrepreneurial journey like?
Oh my God, that is such a good question. Because I thought about all those things, I was like, okay, what should be my next step? Like, maybe I'll just go back to school. Like, that's safe. Like, I know how I am as a student. I could tell everybody like, oh, I'm a student again. It seems like an easy way to make people proud and not question, what I'm deciding to do. And that just didn't feel right. I also thought about like, maybe I'll just get a job at like another chiropractic office, which is where I was working before I was into real estate. You know, just really like, I really sold myself short and I just didn't have the confidence to actually start my own business, which essentially, you're right, is life coaching. It's you definitely need to have that entrepreneurial spirit. And I always have had that in me. I just have never tested out those wings fully. Like I've always sort of partnered with someone or taken someone else's dream and supported that. But with this life coaching business, it was my own dream. And so not only was I sort of stepping out and saying, you know, this is something that means a lot to me, but I was saying, I trust myself to make it work. And that was probably the most vulnerable place I've ever been, was in that place of literally not knowing if it was going to work or how it was going to work, but just saying I'm willing to sort of take that risk because anything less than that would be settling. And I was so sick of settling and so sick of just making decisions based out of fear that I just threw myself into it. And it's been an incredible experience. And I really have come to learn what I am made of and what I'm capable of.
Definitely. I think that, you know, something that you touched on is you had to take a risk to do this. It wasn't cut out for you, and you really had to develop this self-confidence and cast away those doubts about doing this, because there is a sense of wanting validation. And I love what you said about, if I go to school, I can at least tell people that I'm going to school. And it creates this facade of, oh, I have everything together, because it makes us comfortable. You know, at what point were you just like, I don't care what that perception is of me anymore? And I feel like that is something that everybody still, you know, wants to hold on to, is what makes other people comfortable, you know, because it sounds better, versus doing what you think or staying true to yourself or your own decisions.
Yeah. You know, I think like I had to have that Band-Aid ripped off because that was my comfort zone. That was, I found my sense of self-worth in being able to make other people happy. And so I needed sort of that slap in the face. And that came for me when I left my marriage. I had a like coming to Jesus moment is what a lot of people call it, where, you know, I was being like emotionally abused, verbally abused, and I kept victimizing myself. Why is he treating me like this? Like, why does he think it's okay to treat me like this? And one day it just hit me like a light bulb. And the answer was, it's because you are allowing him, you know, you are choosing to continue to try to please him, and you are choosing to continue to make this a priority over yourself and your own needs. And the question in my mind that kept coming up was, you know, like, how did I get here in every situation in my career? The fact that I had to walk away from a career, how did I get here? Oh, it was because you were choosing to please other people. How did I get here with, you know, different friendships that I had to let go of because they were toxic? Oh, because you were choosing, you know. And so for me, every way I looked at it, I had to begin choosing myself. And it wasn't so much that I was like, screw it, I don't care what anyone thinks anymore, because yes, I absolutely did. And in fact, choosing myself was probably one of the biggest fears I ever had, because then it was like, okay, where do I get my sense of self-worth then if I'm choosing myself? And so I had to learn from that place of fear how to be courageous and to draw my sense of self-worth from my own courage. So with this whole business thing, like, it definitely came with boatloads of fear, and boatloads of self-doubt and questioning is this correct? And having no one to really tell me that I'm doing a good job. And I just had to really base it off of my feelings and did I feel like I was doing a good job? Right. So yeah, great question.
I think there's a level of vulnerability that comes with stepping out of your comfort zone. And like you said, this can be applied to all aspects of our lives. But particularly when you're in your 20s, because that's, a lot of the listeners here and a lot of people who are going through major life transitions, we come to this crossroads where we realize, like, are we going to do that thing that makes us super uncomfortable, or are we going to stay in this because it's what we know? And maybe that's all we're deserving of, is what we know. So, I really want to talk on vulnerability and authenticity, because I think this is a huge conversation piece, especially because now not only are we in this career or in this transitional phase of our life, but there's almost now a camera on it at all times. And in our day and age of having social media, of broadcasting our life, I feel like there is also that fear of truly figuring out or showing that vulnerable side. So what are your thoughts on, being vulnerable, being authentic, and maybe how we're portraying or sharing our lives on social media?
Whoa, yeah. I think, I don't know if I've told you this, or if you've scrolled down enough on my Instagram, but so I actually, my Instagram used to be full of all my modeling photos. And I modeled for about 6 years, and my Instagram was a place that I marketed that part of myself. And there was very little thought in the captions that I would write. I would only post photos that showed certain sides of me that I thought were flattering. Very, very, very curated to make me look like I had it all figured out, like I had an amazing life. Everything was peaceful. I was happy. Things are beautiful, like very edited, extremely edited. And I get that, like, that's the business. And I have a lot of respect for models and for people in that business. I think, like, it comes with a lot of hard work and a lot of focus. But for me, I had never felt so alone. People would send me a lot of praise and a lot of, for the way that I was looking, for the trips that I was posting. And I got some temporary like juice out of that. And it felt really good to feel like people admired me in that way. But it wasn't authentic. It wasn't really who I am. I'm the type of person who, I grew up not being the pretty girl. I grew up being someone who was very funny and very smart and very caring. And so many of my friendships were formed based off of like what was inside of me. And so when I went into modeling and that part of me was totally ignored, or I totally ignored that part of me, it created this like disconnect between the amount that I was able to really bond with people. And when I started life coaching, and my Instagram feed heavily started to become more the real stuff, and really like parts of myself that I was so afraid to show, and pictures of me without makeup on. And like, it was terrifying because I immediately lost like thousands of followers. And it was like, see, Leah, this is why you can't show yourself. Nobody wants to see that, and I had to fight that urge to turn back to the facade. And it was one of the biggest tests for me, because at the time also in my real world, and not in the social media world, I was also beginning to show up more authentically, and I was losing people in my life because of it, and so it was a confirmation to my fear mind that I wasn't good enough. And what kept me showing up authentically was the relationships that I was actually forming. I lost a lot of shallow relationships, and I gained immediately some incredible friendships and incredible relationships with people that really cared about what I was saying, what I was feeling, really wanted to share with me their truth. And that was, I had to sort of learn that that is what I was looking for in life. That's the piece that was missing for me, was that true authentic bond. So as far as social media goes, I think that I get it. I'm not here to shame anybody and I know you aren't either, but it's hard to really show up authentically in a world that it does not treat people very kindly who show up authentically. And you don't have to share every little thing about yourself. You really don't. But whatever you're sharing, make sure it's true. Make sure that people are looking at it and they're comparing themselves to you, and it does have an impact on others' self-esteem. Not that it's your responsibility to make everyone feel better, but know that there is impact there, and know that a lot of people are probably questioning themselves just like you are. And to even just show up authentically might give someone else permission to do that too, and make us not feel so isolated in our human experience.
I love everything you said. And, I don't know how much you know too about the beginning of the reason that this platform started. So the Head Honcha came to me as an idea of a trailblazing woman, or just women in general, who are doing things differently. And they're broadcasting not just the success, but the ugly, the setback, the challenge. Because what happens is when somebody chooses to take a path or a road less traveled that many people aren't going down, it becomes extremely isolating. And there's often the idea of comparison. I'm not as far along as that person, or I, shouldn't be doing this because it's being looked down upon. It just becomes extremely isolating, but that doesn't always mean you're not on your own true or right path. And I think that using social media, and especially with this platform and having the podcast and sharing the stories, it's about highlighting the women who are doing things differently, because it's not that it's not being done. It's more so, like you said, it's not most often being shared, right? Because people are afraid to share that side. They're afraid to show what the struggle looks like because of what it might be judged as from others. I think that this also goes hand in hand with a lot of the mental health issues that are currently arising from this, or people feeling that need to have it all together, have it all figured out. And that's not always the case. Social media can very much be a highlight reel, or you can actively choose to make it a place, a platform for community, for sharing, for engagement. And I think that's something you and I both on this journey have learned, because we've definitely both have steered in that direction and are rallying women who are excited about coming together and sharing those struggles and celebrating the success as well, but truly identifying that, hey, we don't have it figured out yet, but we're doing things differently and we're rallying together as we're on this path.
I love that, Kiersten. You are a trailblazer yourself, and I think that it is reflected in what you've created here. We're all just sort of conduits of this creative power, and you're sitting here saying I don't know what this is, but it needs to be created. I'm going to create this space for everybody to come and share their stories. So definitely give power to you for making this happen.
Thank you. And again, I think what you're doing, and we're really going to get back to your career and something else that's really commonly faced in relationships, because I think that this conversation is one that needs to be had as women, particularly, and even, you know, minority Latina women, because, you know, that is my background. And I think that we are stepping, especially millennial women, we're stepping into a role where it's no longer traditional, in the sense that we're changing career roles, we're now becoming breadwinners, and our expectation of relationships might be different from generations before us. And now you see a lot more two people in a relationship who are both consumed in their careers, who are both consumed, you know, in busy lifestyles. And, you know, a lot arises from that. And I know those are people that you work with in your everyday career, because you deal with those relationships, you deal with those types of people. So I guess a very broad or general question is, how can millennial relationships sustain in our attention demanding and energy consuming lifestyle?
I think that there's a really common misconception that there's two ways that we have recently in the past century been conditioned to perceive relationships. One is the very, very, very traditional, like, you have to give it all up and just it's all about, you know, compromising yourself to make the relationship work. Then there's this newer perspective that maybe come into play, I don't know for how long, but with the whole attitude of the self, right? And what happens is the divorce rate has started to go up, right? Because we are trying to put ourselves first before the relationship too. What I think is that there can be a marriage of both. I think that it is not two people coming together only. Like, I think it's three entities. I think it's both individuals, so one and two, and their ability to really visit what it is they value most and have a fulfilling life as individuals. And then there's the partnership that they form as two wholes, and how much they can nurture that coming togetherness, because the individuals are both nurtured. And from that partnership, that will also nurture the individuals. So it's like this symbiotic thing that happens across all three entities. And we don't have to lose ourselves to have a relationship work. And we don't have to leave a relationship in order to be happy on our own, right? I think the trick is finding wholeness in all three areas, right? Like, being in relationship with someone as, you know, I am whole and complete as I am, and I want to offer all of me to you so that I can support you in actually chasing your dreams too, and vice versa. And that we can chase our dreams separately too. And it just makes the relationship even more powerful. So I think as millennials, we're sort of facing this time where we have to think of it as all three of those things. We can't allow ourselves to get swept away and lose ourselves, which is what a lot of us do, and which is what I did too. But we also can't allow ourselves to lose sight of the importance of relationship and the importance of intimate connection. We are not meant to do this on our own. You know, this is why not a lot of us, but like, this is why depression is also, I think, a major thing too, is that we think we have to do it alone. We think that in order to be strong, we have to say, like, I don't need anybody. Solitary confinement wouldn't be a thing if it wasn't so painful, right? Like, we're meant to be in partnership with people. We're meant to be working with others. We're meant to feel connected to the world around us. This is just human nature. And I think that shouldn't be minimized because people are fearing losing themselves. I think that's also based off of fear too. I think we need to surrender to the fact that we can be strong individuals, but that we also need each other in order to fully thrive. I don't know if that totally makes sense.
It does. It really
Okay.
does. I think that I've heard that about you need to be 100% of yourself in a relationship. It's not two people make a whole, it's two wholes that are coming together to form the third. And I love the way you put it very clearly. I think that as being in our younger 20s, we have a lot of self-identifying to do. We have a lot of self-discovery to do. And it's hard to ever feel like you're at 100% of that whole. But I think that that is important. And I think that is a part of the process. And it's so easy to think that, a relationship isn't working for the right reasons, or, nothing is going right. But it's a lot of it is reminding yourself to look inward, like, hey, what work have you done also in your own self? Like maybe there's a bigger issue within yourself, that there's something on your journey that you have to identify. Like, are you being fulfilled? Are you at where you need to be right now to serve somebody else? Serving yourself first before serving somebody else is something that I think is okay, and it needs to be done. It might not often be done enough because, like you said before, it's so easy to want to give to others at all times. So what are some ways that these young women and men on their early journeys can adopt practices into giving themselves that self-love and self-care and awareness, so that they can go forward and feel full in everything, and being a part of a community and being a part of a relationship and just tackling their dreams?
I think that your 20s are a time of adventure and exploration. I think that you don't have to have it all figured out. This is where a lot of mistakes can be made. Well, we make mistakes our whole life, but like, this is where, I guess you can be a little easier on yourself to sort of explore, these different parts of ourselves. But I guess to be a little more proactive about not losing yourself in relationships, because the 20s are also a time where a lot of pain happens, where a lot of, because of these mistakes, we start to experience different levels of trauma, and we carry that into these more serious relationships in our 30s. So I think one thing you can do in your 20s to really, I guess, make sure you're getting the full picture and allowing yourself your own process while staying on top of your mental health, is to maybe talk to people who you look up to. Talk to people who have maybe gone through similar path that you're considering going through. Talk to them about the possible pitfalls that they've experienced. People that will be honest with you and that you will trust, or that you can trust. I would even coach at that age. Many of my clients are in their early and mid 20s and are just experiencing this extreme urge to like create something of themselves, but they don't know how. They're like, I don't know my life purpose. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm done with college now, but like, what's the next step? You're sort of thrown into the real world. And because there is no blueprint to adulthood and being out of school, many people end up finding themselves in relationships where they just throw themselves at that completely. So I would say, if you're having, trouble really visiting, like, what is important to me? What are my values? What's the plan? What's the next step? Talking to a professional can really help. Someone who's very like future focused. And I'm not just saying this to like, give me a call or anything, but I am saying that because it's extremely helpful. It can help you work through a lot of the blind spots that you're not seeing. but I guess more simply, something you could do is just keep trying new things. Go outside your comfort zone. When you're afraid of something, that's probably a good sign that you should at least try it. You don't have to commit to it. But I would say keep trying new things and don't be afraid of fear. It's natural. And it's probably a sign, that this is an edge. Like, this is an edge for you. Maybe you should see what's past it.
Right. I think what you said about seeking help is really important. Just within the past 10 years, I had to really dig deep and truly understand what depression even was. And I think that conversation, like, now is a lot more, it's being had a lot more, and people are starting to see that, wait a minute, you can always seek help, in terms of talking to someone, in terms of resources for your mental health. It doesn't always have to be at an extreme, but it's okay to seek help versus just not talking about it. And the reason I bring this up is because, in high school and going to college, I didn't know what depression was. I thought that the stereotypical was somebody who, wore black, was just kind of out of the open, not out in the open, and was very isolated and, hiding behind and not ambitious. Yet the things that I was experiencing, having gone through moving to a different city across the country, diving into, a 4-year university, having a lot of like financial setbacks, and then also just like changes, majors, like there was a lot of change that was happening. And I just personally experienced a point in my life where I felt like I couldn't handle it. I felt like I was suffocating, but I always wanted to have a smile on because I thought if I gave up that I was weak. And I was afraid what parents would think of me if I told them that I was miserable after I did work so hard to get there. And I personally didn't know what I was dealing with. And I thought that I had to keep it in and all together. And I didn't know how to share that without feeling weak. And that's a word I'll always go to because that's how I self-identified myself, was weak. So I think that sharing that advice about talking to someone, about sharing these experiences, because you're often probably not the only one experiencing that either. There's so many people who are living these lives that doesn't mean you have to be hidden away from the world. You could be present, you could be out there doing things, but it doesn't mean that you're not personally going through something. And seeking that help, seeking those opinions is really important. There are signs that somebody is struggling. There are signs that you're personally struggling. And I think that identifying it within yourself is probably going to be the most important, because even my parents couldn't not tell you what I was going through because I didn't let them in that close. And this is something that I really wanted to bring up, because being Mental Health Awareness Month, there's someone who's possibly listening to this who's striving to do it all right, striving and still feeling like they're suffocating. And I think that piece of finding someone to talk to is extremely important.
Yeah. I feel like I can relate to what you said on so many levels, and which is why having these really transparent and authentic conversations are so important. Especially when we're going through transitions in life, which is why I love coaching people through transitions. It's such tricky water to navigate. There's a lot of uncertainty, and humans, although we do thrive with a certain level of uncertainty, stability and security are also very important. And when our world is being shaken up a bit, it's hard to say, like, I'm scared right now, like this doesn't feel good for me. I need a sense of, stability here, and I'm not really feeling it quite yet. Those situations, that's called like situational depression, and it's so common. And we tend to, if we don't feel like we have anyone to turn to, we tend to sort of like hole up and keep it all in and say, I'm fine, everything's fine. And then we sort of like go into ourselves. I think one of the most powerful things you can do is say when you're not fine and know that that's okay. Being able to say like, I'm not doing too great. I know it can be super scary. You don't want anyone to think you're weak. And so making sure that you're telling somebody who won't judge you is super important. It's not safe to be vulnerable in front of everybody, right? That's why it's scary, is because there is potential for pain. There's potential for rejection. Make sure the people that you're talking to are people that are compassionate and who will just listen. I think that is something very proactive that you could do when you need to share how you're really feeling, especially if those feelings are difficult. I also think that getting through depression is not the same for everyone. Sometimes it can take just a bright sunny day for you finally to be like, I'm out of it. Sometimes it can take someone creating a new plan for their life and having something to look forward to. Sometimes it can take time, just time. Sometimes it's talking to somebody. Just know that it's not a one size fits all, and that's okay too. Like, just because someone's like, oh, you just need a better life plan for yourself, and if you try that and that doesn't work, like, it's okay. It's not a one size fits all. But just knowing that, like, you can keep trying different avenues to see what works best for you, I think is important too. Also, if it's more than just situational depression, if it's clinical depression, seeking out a therapist or psychiatrist, maybe getting the chemicals in your brain assessed, maybe eating better, exercising. These all play a role into our mental health. And as I said, it's not just a one size fits all. Even I consider myself a pretty happy person, but like, I'll tell you what, like, if I have a couple too many glasses of wine, I'm not feeling too great for the next couple days. So it all plays a role into the way that we're able to sort of navigate life. And so just taking into account, like, just because someone is putting like an inspirational message out there and it's not hitting for you, doesn't mean there's something wrong with you, right? It just means find your message, find the thing that works. And if at the very least you need to just talk about it with somebody, make sure that person that you're sharing things with is going to like create a safe space for you to share.
Right. I think, how can you encourage people, or how can people make the decision for themselves to leave their comfort zone or to take a risk when they have some of those experiences or scars and they're afraid of a transition again? Because what if they don't take it well, or what if it doesn't work out okay? Like, how can they go through these transitions without being fearful of what they might experience?
I don't think that the fear does go away. I think that that's why it's so brave to be vulnerable, right? Like Brene Brown, I love her, talks about vulnerability cannot exist without fear, courage cannot exist without fear. Like, if you do something that's just easy, that no one's afraid of, no one's going to be like, wow, she's so brave, so just knowing that vulnerability is extremely scary and you are going to feel the fear, and it may just get easier as time goes on, but I'm not sure if it'll ever go away completely. But that's what makes people brave. That's what creates permission for others to do it, is someone saying, I'll be the first one, right? I'll be willing to do it. I'll be the one that's going to take the risk. I need more from my life. I want deeper connections, and I'm willing to stick my neck out there. Just knowing that, like, fear is natural. We all have it. Even the bravest people, they are brave because they have fear and they did it anyway. And it'll get easier. But maybe not at least shaming yourself while you're fearful. is definitely like a key point to that. Cause I used to do that a lot too. Like, why can't I be more brave? That creates a whole another level of shame and depression. So just making sure, that like, it's normal. Fear is normal. It's just going to take time.
100%. And as you're talking about this, it relates so much, because I remember being there, and I remember coming to the point where I literally had to decide that I am scared, but I'm doing this anyway. And it comes down to that decision, and you just have to weigh your options and look here. If I do it, what if this could happen, both positive and negative? But if I don't do this, what am I settling for? Am I okay being at this position, at this?
Right.
I think another thing that often stops people from taking a risk is the fear of not being ready, or the fear of not being perfect, which was my problem. I had the idea, if I'm going to do something, I have to do it at 100% perfection, and it has to look great, and it has to just be my best performance ever. Versus now I've adopted the thing, well, I'm just going to stumble along and do things until I learn how to do it right. I think that is so important, and learning that it doesn't have to be perfect. You can jump being scared and learn along the way that this is a learning experience. It doesn't have to be a game every time. You just have to show up, and you have to do something and take those risks, because like you said, it gets easier the more you do them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Perfectionism and analysis paralysis, as a lot of people call it, it can keep us stuck. So yeah, just maybe getting really familiar with the fears that you have, and know that like, hey, they're there. They've been there your whole life to protect you, and there's no shame in that. But now they're not going to run the show anymore, right? You are going to say, thank you, fear, for keeping me safe, but like, I want more for my life, and take that action anyway.
And how much of that fear do you think is actual versus maybe us creating those scenarios in our head? How often do you see that? Are many of our fears coming from a place of a fact, of truth? Or do you think that a lot of the times it is just what we're believing that might not have truth or merit to it?
Yeah, I think all of our fears usually, not always, but usually come from a past experience that we've had that has scared us, and that we've created this story in our head that that's always going to be the case. Like, maybe you wanted to hang out with a group of girls when you were in elementary school, and they were like, no, you can't sit with us. And suddenly you thought, no one thinks that I'm cool. Right. And so you carry that story with you through the rest of your life. You're always thinking, I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. And if I expose myself, then people will know the truth. And I think there's like truth behind every fear, like a slight bit. But I think we have to figure out, like, where did that fear originate? Because it's probably not true still. Right. If we talk to our friends and family and people that love us in the adult world about how we're actually feeling, we're probably not going to be shunned. We're probably not going to end up alone. My fear for the weirdest, I feared that if I really spoke what was on my mind and was real about my emotions with people I knew, that they would all reject me. They would all tell me that I am out of my mind, and that I would be abandoned by all of them, and I would end up homeless on the street. Like, this is was literally my worst fear for some reason. And I had to figure out, like, is that real? And it was not real, obviously. Like, I'm fully capable of, and I have before, like, made sure that I'm always going to be okay. And I know I'm always supported. I have a great family and friend circle. So I think it's also visiting, like, going down the path of your fear. Like, if the worst case scenario did happen and people did reject you, what are you afraid of is going to happen to you? And once you come to that final destination of where your fear has sort of like really gotten blown out of proportion, maybe deciding like, will that really ever happen to you? Or if it did happen, how would you handle it? And for me, the answer is like, I would never let that happen. But if it did happen, I know I'm smart enough and friendly enough and hopeful enough to, you know, take different action to get me through anything.
Exactly. I think right now, being May, there's a lot of transitions right now happening for a lot of people. May and June are months of graduation. I know a lot of people in my personal life have some pretty big decisions to be making. There's a lot of transitions happening for a lot of people, and in the Head Honcha community, that's something that we're a little bit more used to because we're in transition mode and risk-taking mode many of the time.
Mm.
So what's a piece of advice that you can make to somebody, and this is going to be more general, but something that you would want to leave with a woman who is trailblazing a very unique, her own path and is scared, but she's excited for the future, but she knows she has a long road ahead of her. So just what's one piece of advice you would want to give her?
I would say I know this sounds kind of off topic, but I would say you don't have to quit your day job right away. I think that when you're first starting something new for yourself, many people think like, oh, it's only black or white. I have to completely, you know, be this new businesswoman. I have to be in this new passion career of mine right away. But the reality is like, you need financial stability still too. And in fact, that having a job that it creates that stability can create a lot more space for you to be creative and put like positive energy into something rather than that scarcity mentality. So for me, for instance, like when I first started my business, I was doing marketing for other companies, and I didn't really talk about it, and not a lot of people do talk about it, but it kept me paying my bills while I was building my business. It kept me in my integrity with building my business because I didn't have any sense of, you know, dependency on the fact that the business needed to work, right? I definitely let it grow organically, so I wasn't pushing things, you know, really hard. And so it felt really good. It felt like a really good growth period. So I would say if you're trying to create something new for yourself, know that it doesn't have to be like, you don't have to throw yourself in it right away. And in fact, most entrepreneurs do not. Most people trying out new things do not. A lot of people work at restaurants, work at coffee shops while they're building their dream. Like, there is no shame in that. I did it. I am so thankful for my marketing job that I had. And in time, you know, when it feels right, you'll finally let go of the shore and you'll be able to swim on your own. But like, don't drown yourself right away, right? Take it step by step.
I love that. Your current reality isn't your final destination. That's just all I
Right.
heard. That it's so easy to want to be defined by what we're doing in that moment with the spotlight, but that's not where you're going. It's just part of the path.
Right.
And it's okay.
Exactly.
A lot of different risks and throw darts at the board and try different things and look
Yes.
silly. Like, this is the time to be doing 1,000,001 things because we're becoming and discovering on this journey. I think that is so important. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I can't wait to share this with the community, with these young women who are embarking on these trailblazing journeys and trying different things, because confidence is really important. And you don't have to be certain 100% of the time. You just have to believe in yourself and believe that what will happen for you is going to come to pass. So thank you again so much, Leah, for having this conversation and for really touching on all these different aspects that I think affect all of us on this journey to self-discovery and to our dreams, essentially.
Yeah, it's been so awesome to talk about this with you. And I love sort of the journey that we had through this conversation. I think it's a lot of the things that we talked about are important. And I'm really looking forward to you sharing this with your community too.
Thank you so much.